So today, lads, we are going to be redrafting the 2001 draft, known by most people as the Kwame Draft. We're going to be redrafting the Kwame Brown draft. And this draft was honestly a bit better than I expected it to be. And I would have thought, you know what? Kwame Brown is probably still going to be a top 10 pick. And I do think, in hindsight, Kwame Brown still might be like a lower lottery pick, but he, without question, does not make the top 10 picks. Before we get on to the redraft, if you guys are new to the channel, subscribe. We're doing Hoopsmas on this channel, so we are going to be uploading 10 videos a day from the 1st to the 25th of December. And we're also going to be redrafting a draft every single year. So we started with 2000 yesterday. We're going to be doing 01 today, 2002 tomorrow, up until a redraft of 2024 on Christmas Day. And if you guys enjoy that, subscribe. We're trying to hit 7.1k by the end of the day. We're only 12 off. That would be incredible if we are able to hit that today. Honestly, that would be a ridiculous number. But anyway, so in the real 2001 WNBA NBA draft, the first pick by the Washington Wizards was Kwame Brown. Kwame Brown, I mean, he had a mediocre NBA career, like a lot better than people give credit for, but still not spectacular. He lasted 13 years in the league. But in a redraft, the number one pick is going to be Pau Gasol. Pau Gasol was the Rookie of the Year. He is a guy who really should have been one of the top 75 players ever. He's got 2 rings, and for me, it was a really close one. I think there were 2 players that I actually believed the 2 single biggest snubs from the NBA 70. Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. Dwight. The 2 biggest snubs, not named Dwight Howard, were both in this draft with no top 75 players in this draft. I think Pau Gasol was a near perennial all-star in his prime. You could make the argument that a lot of people do believe he should have been the Finals MVP in 2010. He was an all-star as late as 2015 when he went to Chicago. Like, Pau Gasol was for a decade one of the best power forwards. Yes, his stats don't jump off the screen when you look at them, but they are like we all watched the game. Anyone who knows at the time, Pau Gasol was superb. And again, one of the best, after Shaq, the next best teammate that Kobe realistically ever had in his career. So the number 2 pick in the draft was Tyson Chandler. So Tyson Chandler, in the end, he went number 2 to the Los Angeles Clippers and was traded to the Chicago Bulls. I think that was in the trade to send Elton Brand to the Clippers, if I'm not mistaken. But the number 2 pick, and this is a really close one because I had this guy number 1 the first time I was talking about it. It's Tony Parker. So Tony Parker was a really late pick in the draft. Like, he was the last pick in the first round, the 28th pick. And Tony Parker was, like, I think he finished as high, like, he's a Hall of Famer. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, Tony Parker is finished as high as like 5th in MVP voting. Like, he is one of the biggest snubs of all time for the he's one of the biggest snubs on the all NBA 75th squad. Because this guy won a Finals MVP, was a Ray Allen circus shot of winning another Finals MVP. It would be hilarious. He would be 5-0 in Finals with 2 Finals MVPs if Ray Allen didn't hit that crazy running back 3-point shot. That's mental. He's a guy who could have won the Finals MVP in 2014. He was the top scorer on the San Antonio Spurs team in 2014. And I'm not joking. Like, Tim Duncan's prime realistically a lot of people say it lasted until about 2011, 2012. I personally think from 2007 till 2012, Tony Parker was arguably the best player on his team. He was a guy who was arguably the best player on a team that contained a prime Tim Duncan. So for me, Tony Parker has to at least... how he wasn't in the top 75 is beyond me. When some people have Duncan in their top 5, and for a decent chunk of Duncan's prime, he was a 1A, 1B with Tony Parker on that team. The number 3 pick in this draft, it actually went, Pau Gasol was the 3rd pick, and the Hawks traded it to the Vancouver Grizzlies. And when we go peak for peak, I think you can make an argument that this guy, peak for peak, might have had the highest peak from an individual basis of anyone in the draft. I still think it was Tony Parker, but after Tony Parker, I still think peak for peak, Gilbert Arenas. Like, this guy, on his day, could give anyone 50. On his day, he could go toe-to-toe with the best players in the world and get the better of them. He could get the better of any player on any given day in one of the toughest eras to do that. He was one of the best scorers in the NBA. Yeah, he didn't have, his prime was 3 years. And not only his prime was 3 years, he had 4 good years in his career. But I still think those 4 good years were so high that I have to put him on in this at number 3. Gilbert was a flat-out bucket getter. And he was just an exceptionally good player. At number 4, the pick was by the Chicago Bulls. They took Eddie freaking Curry. They took Eddie Curry. And if you're wondering where Eddie freaking Curry came from, if you guys, again, back in my 2K days, for some reason, Eddie Curry was the best Curry in NBA 2K. And I'm not joking. Who was the best shooting Curry? Was it Del Curry, Seth Curry, or Steph Curry? No, it was Eddie Curry. We used to call him the fourth Curry. We used to call him the Steph Curry's long lost brother because for some reason they made him 7 foot tall Steph Curry, who could also play the point guard. Eddie Curry in 2K, never forgotten. Shout out to Eddie Curry. Good guy as well, actually. Good guy. But shout out to him. But he's not going for in his redraft. It's going to be Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson was a guy that he was one of the kind of forgotten all-stars. For the amount of all-star games Joe Johnson made, we kind of forgot. He's been almost underrated. People kind of forgot how many he made and how just good of a career Joe Johnson had. The thing is, he made them all in the Eastern Conference. He genuinely made them all over in the Eastern Conference. And in the 2000s when the Eastern Conference was weak, I think he's maybe a 2-time All-Star if he stays at Phoenix in the West. He's a big player for those Phoenix Suns teams as well when the Phoenix Suns were really, really pushing to win championships. And I think him at the 4th pick the 4th pick is completely fair. Maybe not the same hype, peak as a Gilbert Arenas, but he was still really good. The 5th pick was Jason Richardson, who went to the Warriors, who went to the Golden State Warriors. He played a lot of his career at Golden State, the best part of his career at Golden State. And with the 5th pick, I'm going to go Tyson Chandler. And Tyson Chandler, it's a funny one. He was written off as a bust. For about 8 or 9 years in his career, Tyson Chandler was written off as a bust. And then suddenly, he has an okay year. Was it in New Orleans or something? But he genuinely had a career resurgence in Dallas. He was so good in Dallas. Was a defensive player of the year in New York. Was an all-star in New York. Was the starting center on an Olympics team. He was genuinely an all-star level player. And for me, I think you could maybe have him a little bit lower, but I do think on the defensive end, he was exceptional. And I thought he was good even later on in his career. I thought he was maybe it wasn't maybe deserving how much he was called a bust early on in his career, but later on in his career, I do think he did enough to get himself into the top 5 in this draft. With the number 6 pick, so from here on out, there are all-stars, and the 6th pick this is one where I'm you guys might really criticize me for this one. And I'm going to go Zebo. Zach Randolph was unbelievable in Memphis for about 4 years. And I'm who at their peak would I rather have on a team? And you know what? Maybe Zach Randolph. Maybe him above Tyson Chandler. That's probably, in hindsight, a bad decision to put him at 6. But, in Portland, in New York, he wasn't great. And I don't know. I think he was really good. He really, epitomized the those grit and grind Grizzlies. I still think that, I know he was such a good offensive player, but again, Tyson Chandler had probably a similar around the same years that Zebo was like an all-star level player, was balling out in Memphis, Tyson Chandler was the best defensive player in the NBA at that time, or at least one of the best defensive players in the NBA. Ironically, when he won Defensive Player of the Year, he was all defensive second team. But I don't know. It's a tough one. It is a tough one there. And even with Joe Johnson and Gilbert, I think the top two are set, and then these next four, I think you can put them in any order. I'm gonna have him at number 6, but it's still I don't really feel good about putting him at number 6. At number 7 in this draft is I'm gonna go Richard Jefferson, purely just based on longevity. Richard Jefferson lasted 16 years in the league. He's won a ring. He was part of those New Jersey Nets teams that made the he's part of those Nets teams that made 2 NBA finals. He won a ring with Cleveland. He was a really good vet. He could shoot by the end of his career. He could shoot the ball. He was a high flyer at the start of his career. I think Richard Jefferson was a really good player, and just purely based on longevity, I'm going to have him in at 7. And this pick was Eddie Griffin, and ironically was traded to Houston, but was taken by the Nets. And then number 6, who I forgot to mention, was Shane Battier, who was taken by the Grizzlies. Shane Battier, I'm just going to say this right now, was my 11th pick. He would be my 11th pick, and there is logic around it. I would probably have like Battier 11th pick. I might have like Redmonovich maybe a 12th pick, or either like Redmonovich or D'Alembert, and then I'd probably go maybe 14th if that was what the lottery was at the time. That's where I'd probably put Kwame. But I'm going to have Richard Jefferson at 7 just because of longevity. At number 8, we have the guy who I keep. If you guys watched me in 2K, I will always mix up these two guys just because I keep just the names. It's J. Rich. I'm going to have Jason Richardson. Again, I think there are tiers to this draft. For me, there's the top 2, then there's the next 4 who were like not perennial all-stars, but were like all-star players. And then there's the next 4 players, and also Shane Battier is included in that. They weren't all-stars, they're really good NBA players. So Jason Richardson, superb in Golden State, was ridiculously good when he was in Phoenix in the playoffs. And getting him at the 8th pick would be crazy good value. But he never made an all-star team. He's just one of those guys where it's he's won 2 dunk contests and was a good scorer. But a lot of the times he was a really good scorer when a lot of bad teams. So he had quite a decent amount of trade value. He was a decent player, I guess. But I think you can make the argument that he was never really the best. Any of the good teams he was on, he was never the best player. When the Golden State Warriors were good, Baron Davis was better. So we're gonna have him in here at 8. The 9th pick was by the Detroit Pistons. They selected Rodney White, and with this one, the 9th pick, we're gonna select a one-time All-Star, Gerald Wallace. Gerald Wallace was an All-Star with the Charlotte Bobcats and actually led the Bobcats to, I think it was their first ever winning season. Gerald Wallace was one of those guys where it's he was so good from about 2007 to 2011 maybe. He was pretty good at the Blazers, and then they traded him because they had Nick Batum as well, and they decided that they were going to really push through Nick Batum, and ironically they got Damian Lillard in the trade for him. He went to the Nets when they were in New Jersey, when they were trying to compete, when they're trying to basically buy a title. He stayed for a season in Brooklyn. Then they realized he had a pretty bad contract, so he ended up getting traded in the KG Paul Pierce trade to the Celtics. And after he had a good first year in New Jersey, I think he had an okay first year in Brooklyn, to be honest. But once he got traded to the Celtics, his career was effectively over. Gerald Wallace, 2K GOAT, I guess. But I'll put him here as the 9th pick. And the 10th pick, a lot of people would probably be angry at me for not picking Shane Battier here. And if there was a 10A, 10B, I would. But just prime for prime, peak for peak, Mehmet Okur. Like, Mehmet Okur was making all-star teams in the Western Conference back when that was hard to do. When that was really hard to do. He was one of the better centers in the NBA, and he was one of the first, like, true stretch fives. The guy was a real stretch five. He won a ring in Detroit, I think. The Mehmet Okur won a ring in Detroit, didn't he? But he was like one of those best. He was one of the best players, and he was like with those Jazz teams with AK, Boozer, Darren Williams. A lot of people just forget that Mehmet Okur was at times one of the better players on those teams. And the fact is, he was young. Like, he wasn't old when he retired. He wasn't old when he was doing this. Like, he was an all-star in 2007. And, like, that was probably over Darren Williams. And that was the year the Jazz made the conference finals. That he was in the league for a couple of years. And did he win a ring? Yeah, he won a ring with those Detroit Pistons teams. And I'm looking at his stats right here. Like, he was a 10-point a game backup for Ben Wallace, one of the best backup centers in the NBA. And in his 2007 season when he was an all-star, he played 80 games, averaged 17 points per game, but shot 40% from three as a 7-foot big. For me, Mehmet Okur, I would honestly consider having Mehmet Okur higher, but he's in that next group of players where it's like, I don't think he was as good as Zebo. I don't think he's as good as Tyson Chandler, but Mehmet Okur, had he not snapped his Achilles, I think we would be talking about him, especially if he lasted instead of like basically being done in the late 2000s. Like, Mehmet Okur, Wikipedia is down for some reason, so I can't, or it's hard to find the stats. But he went literally from averaging 14 a game, and then when he snapped his Achilles after that, never averaged above like 6 points a game for the rest of his season. And he only played 27 more games in his last 3 seasons, and never averaged more than 6 points a game. Like, he was just completely done after that. If he just maybe lasted a little bit into the modern day, people would remember him a bit better. If he had gone ring chasing, if he was able to last a bit longer and went ring chasing. Like, either way though, that is the video. That is the Kwame Brown draft. Again, Shane Battier, number 11. For number 12, I'll just go, screw it. For 12, let's say D'Alembert. 13, let's go Radmanovic at 13, maybe. And 14, give me Kwame at 14, I guess. Give me Kwame Brown, still in the top 14 picks. Maybe put him ahead of Radmanovic. Anyway, yeah, that is pretty much it. See you guys.